I used to treat life like a marathon. I just get up, go at it and wait till I burned out and then reset again. Nowadays, I treat it as a series of sprints. So I build in recovery time and do self-care things. So everybody has their own particular preference. But that, I think, is one of the key distinctions in terms of how you structure your life.
You're listening to the ISF podcast for your organization's better cybersecurity. Your host, ISF CEO Steve Durbin, is an expert in leadership, business culture transformation, and cyber strategies for today's top enterprises. I'm producer Tavia Gilbert. In today's episode, Steve speaks with best-selling author and hypnotist Paul McKenna about something that affects all of us, stress at work. Paul talks about the impact stress can have on workers and gives practical tips to care for yourself and the employees you lead, even in the fast-paced, always-on security industry.
So, Paul, fantastic to see you. Thanks very much for agreeing to meet and do the podcast today.
Thank you, Stephen. Lovely to see you.
Now, you've had a really interesting career. I mean, most recently, of course, you've done a whole range of best-selling books on a number of different topics. You're a hypnotherapist, coach, a whole range of different things. And I wanted to talk about some of those in particular. But I wanted to start really by building on one of the key issues that so many of our members talk to me about, which is the fact that, we operate in the cybersecurity field, which is very, very fast-moving, very high stress. We're seeing a lot of burnout. What are the sorts of things that you think some of the people listening to this could do to deal with stress, in particular, in the workplace?
Well, you're absolutely right. It's right now a massive issue. Anxiety, stress, fear, worry. Because if you think about it, you turn on the TV or you open a newspaper, you're under attack. It's the war, it's the virus, it's the economy, it's something or other. And so understandably, post the pandemic, we were out of the biological pandemic, but we're sort of in a psychological pandemic in as much as stress-related disorders through the roof. And what people can do is there's a number of things. And I'm a hypnotist, so I advocate self-hypnosis or just listening to a hypnotic trance. And there are plenty of them online that people can find. Also, other what we call psychosensory therapies. There's one where you tap on various acupuncture points. And again, this is scientifically proven to reduce stress, trauma, it's used in the treatment of that. There's another psychosensory technique which involves the touch of various parts of the body. And this produces a delta wave, which is synonymous with relaxation. So we know way more than we used to these days about the treatment of trauma, stress, fear, worry, etc. In the same way that, if you had a cell phone back in the 80s, it was like a brick and all you could do is make calls on it. And of course, nowadays it's the size of a bar of chocolate and you can have your office, your music, world communication. So in the same way, psychological technology, and in that I would put modern hypnotherapy, something called neuro-linguistic programming, NLP, which is very popular. And these psychosensory techniques are all very, very good at treating stress. But see, I would say, because, I used to treat life like a marathon. I just get up and go at it and wait till I burned out and then reset again. Nowadays, I treat it as a series of sprints. So I build in recovery time and do self-care things. So, everybody has their own particular preference. But that, I think, is one of the key distinctions in terms of how you structure your life.
I suppose one of the key things with any of these sort of self-help approaches is you need to understand that you have a problem, first of all. How can people, it sounds maybe a little bit silly, but how can you identify that you're under stress? What are some of the things that people can look out for?
Right, so if you get bad moods, if you get sick, if you find that you can't sort of concentrate, your mind's racing too much, those sorts of things. And very often, as you rightly say, it's very hard to detect if there's something up with you until you've reached a point where there's a very big signal, i.e. you get sick or burn out. And so the signals on the way to that, as I say, are things like mood swings and racing mind and, these sort of things. But also when your friends or colleagues tell you, they say, you're right, that sort of thing. So I'm very much a health maintenance guy, rather than waiting till it's too late. So, I do things for self-care like acupuncture. I sometimes do a bit of yoga. I certainly listen to my own hypnotic trances because I have a busy mind and I like to get calm, that sort of thing. But, also a good walk in nature. A 15-minute walk in nature is proven to be a brilliant way to reduce stress because you have all the positive overwhelm from the beauty of nature around you. So those sorts of things they're kind of simple things that make a big difference. And, one of the things I like to do when I'm having a walk in the park in the morning is I do a gratitude list in my head. I think about all the things, my health, the people I love, my job, where I live in the world, things like that. And then I think about small things like that first cup of tea in the morning is fantastic, And so that sort of sets me up for a good day. So I find that if I get my head in a good space at the beginning of the day, the rest of the day sort of follows.
Okay. And just listening to some of the things you've been saying there, I think those were some of the techniques that we were recommending to people during the pandemic, of course.
Yes.
I suspect that quite a few people have now sort of parked those up, put them to one side, because that was during the pandemic, right?
Yes.
Now I'm back at it.
Yeah.
It's full steam ahead, and I don't need to worry about some of those things anymore. What are the sorts of things that employers can do to encourage people to do some of the things you've just been talking about?
Well, okay, there's some fascinating research that shows that if people do meditation, mindfulness, self-hypnosis at the beginning of the day, their productivity goes up. Right. And so, in a sense, you're not doing it just to feel good. You're getting an actual commercial result from it as well. But the thing is, I suppose it really comes from the ethos within the company. I have done a lot of corporate training over the years. I've noticed that, there's in some corporations, there's a big emphasis on achievement at any cost, so they get more burnout. They're always trying to sort of look at ways to compensate for that. I mean, there's something, I'm trying to think, it's a Japanese word for it, karoshi, I think it is, which is literally working yourself to death. And so, again, it comes from certain cultures where it's all about achieving and there's no balance. See, because I find that now I don't treat life like a marathon. I treat it as a series of sprints. I just don't get sick very often, whereas I used to before. And I think it's building in self-care, doing things that give me time to replenish.
Are there some standout companies that you can think of, Paul, that you would say are doing the right kind of things to help people get that balance?
Well, it would be hard to name one or two companies.
But some of the characteristics, perhaps, of the ones that are getting
of companies that are doing it right. Yeah. So obviously there are loads of companies now, have a gymnasium or have some sort of well-being sort of center, they have within their corporation. But also it's the amount of time they invest in their people. I remember once asking Richard Branson, what's the key to a successful business? Is it the concept? Is it the business planning? He said, I can tell you the root of every business is the people. He said, I can tell you, the people understand the business. They all get on together. They have a love for it. It all comes from the people. I'd have to agree with him, that essentially it's the people. And of course, within any culture, you're going to have to adapt. And certain kind of businesses are different to others. But essentially, everyone is selling, and you're selling good feelings. That's what you're selling. So whether you're selling jeans or cars or cakes, you're ultimately selling good feelings. And so it's how you go about that. I mean, with cybersecurity, you are selling literally that feeling of peace of mind.
Yes, absolutely. Or try to.
Yeah.
Let's move on a little bit to another area that I know a lot of, certainly our members, talk to me about, and they may use different words, but it's the whole topic of being a workaholic. I think, again, in the cybersecurity field, we are very conscious that we need to be always on. So, we're always using technology. We're always wondering whether or not something is going to go wrong. And it becomes, I think, for a lot of people, something of an obsession.
Yes.
And it's like any other addiction. That translates into people perhaps not taking the right amount of time off, certainly not doing some of the things we've just been talking about. Any advice you can give for people who feel that they may be drifting into that form of addiction as to how do they identify it, what can they do?
Well, I think you're right to categorize it as an addiction, or I would say compulsion. Now, the thing is that usually successful people are compulsive people, right? They don't think, oh, I might get around to it tomorrow. They're on it. They want to do it. And they can also be anxious because they're perfectionists. So they're good at getting stuff done, but at what cost is what I would say. So when I meet, you see, everyone in a sense is compulsive. For example, I'm compelled to put on my clothes before I leave the house. Nobody ever shows up at work and forget to do it. So some of the compulsions we have are actually very healthy,
well,
right?
You say that. We did actually have one during the pandemic who was on camera and forgot to put his trousers on. But I mean, that's which is fine until you stand up. But I take your point. As a rule, people don't do that.
Yeah, so the thing is that if you're going to be successful, you have to some extent be compulsive. And when it crosses into, say, addiction, you can't stop yourself from doing it. So whatever the addiction is in charge and not you. Now, the thing is, addiction is about changing your state of mind and body. So drinking, drug taking, gambling, sex, shopping, television, and food, particularly sugar food, are the world's drugs of choice. And everybody in the world at some point feels too much stress. They feel overwhelmed. And so they resort to something to change how they feel. Some of the things I just mentioned. And in a sense, some people, they form an addiction to their work because they can, forget about everything else that's going on in their life. They might not have to think about their relationship or, some other stress, from their family or something. So they immerse themselves in work. And of course, was it Oscar Wilde who said, moderation, never take it to excess. But you see, I actually think moderation is a very good idea. Balance is what I would go with. And there's that fantastic Japanese model, Ikigai, with the 4 circles. And basically, it's about what do you love to do, what can you get paid to do, what does the world need, etc. And it's all about finding your sense of purpose. And it's about balance of those things. And so when you're in the 4 squares and it's all working well, you're in a great place because, if you're showing up just to do a job and you don't particularly like it, then life isn't going to be fun for you. So I go by that saying, find something you love to do and you never work again. And at the same time, though, and I've done this in the past, worked myself to, being ill because I got so involved in it. When you hit the sides like that, it's at that point you learn and you go, hang on a minute, I can only do so much. And then I've got to give myself some recovery time.
Right. Okay. So let's take an example. So let's say we've got a chief information security officer, and let's say they work for a large bank, and obviously the pressure is mounting. We've got regulation coming in thick and fast. We've got the pressure of just doing the job. We've got the sort of fairly relentless attacker coming in, trying to obviously steal, manipulate, disseminate misinformation. So it's a full-on kind of job, and I think a lot of the time, people, really don't have the ability to stand back and say, "I've got a problem." It is all about, well, if you need me, you can always contact me, and I'm always that kind of thing. So again, looking at it from the employer's standpoint, because whilst I would say that you can't fix an addict, you can't heal an addict. An addict has to do that for themselves.
Yes.
Right? But how do you, as an employer, go about pointing out some of these things?
Well, the thing is you've got to look at the balance between productivity, output, and also people's health. Now, we know that stress is the reason that 50% of the time people show up at the doctor. So it might be that they show up because of this, but ultimately, stress is at the root of it. And the thing is, a certain amount of stress, or arousal, if you like, is good, excitement, right? But when it crosses over into too much and it's burnout, it's a bad thing. So years ago, when I started in corporate training, one of my colleagues, I asked him, why is it corporations pay so much money to have their staff trained? He said, well, I can show you because look, they see that the days sick goes down, the productivity goes up. So basically, by staying in the zone of balance, so you've got enough output, getting things done, versus balance, which is recovery time in my mind. You get that mix right, then you're going to be more productive in the end. I mean, I remember years ago, I was talking to this guy and I said, so what is it you want? And he went, well, I'm going to achieve and succeed in my business and I'm going to get a bigger house and more cars and all this sort of stuff. And I said, when you look into the future, where are you? And he went, well, I can't see me. And I went, oh, so you're going to work yourself to death to get all this. Why don't you picture yourself doing it all within balance, doing it all within recovery time as well as achievement. And it's one of the things that I found working with super successful people is they are compulsive. They're usually risk takers, but they take educated, calculated risks. Anita Roddick, the founder of The Body Shop, said, I've never met a super successful person that takes risks. They take educated, calculated risks. And then what happens is they have to have a passion about it. They have to have a sense of purpose. The legendary psychiatrist Viktor Frankl said, purpose is the cornerstone of good mental health. So, if you've got something you feel passionate about, you've got a sense of purpose, you've got balance in there, then you're sort of in alignment with the universe and your own sort of personal sense of integrity. When you're not, you'll hit the sides. And that's when you have to take that feedback in and go, okay, what have I done? Why am I drinking too much? Or why am I getting tired and depressed? I see, whatever it is. So those will be the clear signs.
But that, does it not, requires a huge amount of self-awareness?
It does, yes. But what I'm saying is if you're not self-aware, you'll get suddenly a sign from the universe. It'll get you, that's right. Because you'll suddenly, you'll find yourself having mood swings, or you'll find yourself getting sick, or you'll find yourself, there'll be a hit the sides moment. And you kind of don't want to get to that, So one of the things I do now is I'm fortunate enough that if I feel myself, I think I've pushed it, I'm feeling run down, I go and do something self-care. I go and slow things down, use some self-hypnosis, have some acupuncture. I'm a big fan of the vitamin shot, the Myers cocktail. So if I'm super tired, give yourself a massive infusion of vitamins. Suddenly the life force comes back. Right? But that then doesn't mean, I can go and abuse it. So for me, these days, it's very much about living a life of balance.
Mm-hmm. I like the idea about the shots. I'm just scared to death of needles.
Oh, yeah. I can help you with that. Do you hardly ever feel it go in if it's not a problem?
Yeah, so people tell me.
Yeah.
I'm not buying
it. What do you do when you have to have a shot then? Do you sort of grin and bear it?
I try not to. I mean, I really do. I think I did struggle during the pandemic. Obviously, I had some of those. But I was probably a complete wreck for days beforehand, just psyching myself up to it. But then, yes, it is about some of the things you were talking about, and you try to sort of ground yourself. You try to think something else. You try to convince yourself it's not going to be as bad. But for me, it's the whole sort of sensory experience as well, which, the smell, the white coat. I suffer a lot with white coat syndrome.
But yes. Funny, I used to be phobic of the dentist, right? Because when I was a kid, I think he said it wouldn't hurt, and it did, so I bit him, and then he punched me. And I was always terrified of the dentist thereafter. And my dentist is a very gentle man, but I'd gone for many years without having anything done. And every time he went, I would jump in the chair, and he went, look, he goes, you're a danger to yourself. I can't treat you. Didn't you tell me you just gotten interested in hypnosis? This is back in the 1980s. He goes, go and work on yourself. So I got this book out, which... it's a great book by Dr. Richard Bandler. It had the fast phobia cure in it. And I sat and did it, and I went, God, I don't feel frightened anymore. And, it used to take months to cure phobias. Most are done in less than 60 minutes now. And so I went back and I sat down, and I did ask the dentist the other day, I said, how am I? He said, you're a normal patient. I mean, no one should look forward to coming to the dentist, right? I said, yeah, because I don't look forward to it, but I don't care. He went, which is normal.
Fantastic. Paul, it's been a pleasure talking to you. We could go on and on and on, but very interesting to hear, certainly around those two topics we touched on, stress and workaholism, and also some of the little tips around phobias as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Steve. That's great. Great to talk to you.
Special thanks to this week's guest, Paul McKenna. In the meantime, if you enjoyed today's episode, please take a moment to rate and review the podcast, and we'd be pleased if you'd consider sharing the episode. To become a member, get in touch with Steve directly at steve.durbin@securityforum.org or on LinkedIn. Check out all our media and resources. All of it is there to support you at securityforum.org. Don't miss our other podcast, Dear InfoSec, sharing conversations with members about the real-world applications of ISF research. The ISF podcast is produced by TalkBox Productions and Tavia Gilbert. Thanks for listening.